review first, and then we're gonna go through all the other stuff I've missed for like the past couple weeks. I haven't really been paying attention to anything. So yeah, let's do that. I've already did a video about the Balance Manifesto, which is effectively a TLDR, so for those of you on YouTube, it'll be in the description. For those on Twitch, basically stuff got nerfed. And some things got buffed to compensate for the nerfs. I don't know, it doesn't matter. So, patch notes. We gotta start there. This is all the new items. We can kind of guess some stuff from this, but I didn't really look at it yet, so it's cool. I don't know, that doesn't matter. Patch notes time. Good night, does. Oh god, it's been so long. I gotta remember how to do this. Let's work on it. Metamorph Challenge League. Challenge League is a great opportunity for a fresh start in a new economy. For those who don't know, I'm playing SSF with Rand and Co. this league. I'm not going to be doing Trade League or whatever, so we're doing SSF Softcore Metamorph, basically. Group solo stuff, however you want to call it. All your old characters and items are still present in standard and hardcore leagues, but you're encouraged to join the new leagues, complete challenges, and demonstrate your mastery PoE. In the Metamorph Challenge League, follow Exile Tain Octavius, fellow exile, who's investigating the source of ill intent in the world, what he calls the intrinsic darkness. I believe this was named after Octavian. That's what Octavian said, I don't know. That's pretty cool though. You're gonna help him by harvesting flesh samples from monsters, which are gonna be like bosses, and then you're gonna make them into super powerful transforming bosses called metamorphs. You're basically gonna build your own boss and then fight it for loot based on what bosses you put into it. So that's cool. They drop catalysts. You get them by defeating those things, you know. You can use them to increase the quality of rings, belt, and amulets, enhancing certain types of modifiers. They posted some pretty cool previews of the types of jewelry you can make, and it's like 10% more resistance than we already have on top T1 rolls, things like that. So that's pretty cool. Once you reach maps, you'll be able to acquire samples from map bosses in different areas and combine them in Tain's lab for fights that are extra difficult, but extra rewarding. I'm worried this isn't going to be true, but we'll find out. With 3.9, they're standard hardcore, as well as self-found variations of Metamorph, blah blah blah. And you can make privates, which I've already said we're doing. So, new challenge includes 40 challenges, 12 challenges is the footprints, 24 challenges is the weapon effect, and 36 challenges is the portal. The portal looks really cool, but I don't know if I'll be able to get to 36 in SSF. We'll see how much I'm actually willing to play. It's holidays, so I don't know. We'll see. And then you get totem poles for other stuff. No one cares about totem poles. Alright. Major new content and features. Cards of the Atlas is a brand new endgame mapping experience. There's like two expansions happening at the same time. Conquerors of the Atlas is the Atlas rework, and also Metamorph Challenge League at the same time. Shaper and Elder have been defeated, just not by you. Another group of exiles has saved Ray class from these celestial harbingers of doom, but that wasn't enough. They continued to cut paths through the Atlas, leaving carnage in their wake and forcing Xana to seal them in the Atlas forever. But they're trying to find a way out. Can you stop them? There's 5 new endgame boss encounters, powerful new rewards, including new currencies like new exalted orbs and new ways to modify your Atlas. New dexterity skill gem, artillery ballista, shrapnel ballista, ensnaring arrow, and greater volley support. And arrow nova support. There's a bunch of new bow things. We'll go over that after all the other patch notes. The new currencies are Crusaders Exalted Orb, Hunters Exalted Orb, and Redeemers Exalted Orb, and Warlords Exalted Orb. They'll each add an additional modifier to rare from its associated pool of influence modifiers. So like each one of them has their own specific set of roles they can exalt onto things, which is kind of cool. I don't know how rare they're going to be yet. I would assume same tier or rarer than Exalted Orbs, so we'll see. New currency Orb of Awakening. This item can be used on any item with influence, like Shaper or whatever, and then an item of the same type, a ring, and used to transfer that influence to the new item. The original item will be destroyed as a result of this process. Some of the original items mods may be carried over to the destination. You can have 2 influence types onto it. So this is interesting. This is a lot of like what do I want to say? Consequences for standard. You could potentially shape an elder like mirror items with this, but you're gonna have to like deal with the result of what you can get. So I'm not sure. I don't know if you can like eternal it and then awaken, shaper, influence a mirror item, you know, things like that. That'd be kind of cool. Bunch of new uniques, new supports, new divination cards, great. All right, minor new content features. You can now add item filters to your account through the PoE website. I believe NeverSync is making it so that it will auto update your filter at some point, which would be pretty cool. Including those on console, like that's massive. You can automatically update your filter and then keep it updated without having to like download a new text file constantly. I'm excited for that because I don't really pay attention to my filter that much. I only update it like maybe 3 or 4 times a league, and if I can keep it updating automatically with never things like price updates and things like that, that'd be pretty cool. Lion's Eye's watch is prettier now. There's a new loading screen. There's a event recipe for Catalyst. You can now refund multi-choice passives such as those on Ascendant without to reselect your choice without having to refund all the passives after them. That's pretty important, so you can change from like, I don't know, Guardian Ascendant to Necromancer Ascendant without having to spend another 10 plus regrets. So that's cool. 3D art for some new uniques, or from old uniques into uniques, I don't know. Range attack tokens are now called Ballistas. Great. They're now Ballistas. They improved a bunch of range attack skills, visual improvements, basic wand and bow attacks, burning air, barrage, and puncture. We'll see how cool that is. I'm excited they're doing stuff for wands, but I don't think we get the full wand rework until like next league or something. It's mostly just bow focused this league. Arrows that collide with terrain now have a chance to bounce off. This doesn't do anything other than look really cool and help performance in situations where players are firing thousands of arrows. I don't know if you guys remember, I made a build a long time ago with which like just max attack speed, tabula, quill rain, barrage projectiles, dying sun, all the projectiles I could get. I could just fire arrows into a wall in anybody's hideout and eventually crash the instance with how many arrows I stuck into the wall. So this helps prevent that, but it also just looks really cool when you're like mapping and you can shoot towards enemies in a wall area and the arrows will bounce back. I don't think it's going to do anything, but it just looks cool. Other skills have received visual improvements: Firestorm, Frostblink, Freeze Pulse, Heavy Strike. Basically all of the old skills are getting prettier, so that's cool. Hopefully they don't get prettier and also cause lag like MTX does. We'll see. New lab enchants for all the new skills, as well as for Burning Arrow and Explosive Arrow. Cosmetic filter will now also check the description of your cosmetics rather than just the name. That's helpful when you're trying to search for things. Like if you want to search for sword MTXs, you can type sword now, and it'll actually work instead of only finding MTXs that are named X sword. Shadows, dual strike, whatever, that's fine. And continue to incrementally improve sound, artifacts, and environments. They say this every league, and I'm always worried because it never seems to get less laggy. I've been complaining about this really badly the past few days because I didn't play I didn't play Blight League much. I tried to play PvE the last couple days, and I've gotten to a point where sometimes I have like 14 FPS in my hideout, and I have a pretty good build. My computer's pretty solid. There's really no reason that it should be that bad. So I'm hoping that this actually makes a difference this league, but I don't know. When I'm mapping, I get down to like 20, 30 FPS, and I have a 1080 Ti and 32 gigs of RAM and a good i7. Like, there's no reason for it. So we'll see. Maybe all that stuff will finally get fixed in 4.0, but last few leagues has just been getting worse for me, not better. All right, Atlas rework. You now start at the center and work your way outwards. Shaper and Elder storyline is gone, has been replaced by a story that takes place in the aftermath of the old story. There's 5 new difficult in-game bosses, think new Guardians, basically. New mechanic of Watchstones. You can defeat the new Atlas bosses to get them, and they'll be used to raise the tier of all the maps in a particular region, causing all maps of those base types to drop the new higher tier. So think like a clock. So like 6 to 7 o'clock, you can change all of those maps at the same time to be a new tier instead of shaping each map one at a time with your what are they called, Shaper's Orbs. You would shape like a whole cone of area instead, which I think is pretty cool. Eventually you can upgrade your entire Atlas to like T14, T15, T16, which I think is pretty cool as well. Sextants no longer apply to individual maps. They no longer have a radius. They're applied to Watchstones instead, and affect every map in that region. So yeah, same thing. You just affect the whole cone with your Sextants. They're not restricted by map tier, and if 2 or more Watchstones contain the same Sextant modifier, only one will apply. Also, they've been renamed. Xana can now sell Shaper and Elder influence maps. Once you progress your Atlas enough, these act like the new Atlas influence, creating new monsters, threats, and rewards. That's cool, sure. Xana modifiers to change map tiers or reroll base types have been disabled, at least for now. And unique maps now drop with varied tiers based on the state of your Atlas. So we can actually get like T16 Poorjoys for power leveling, for example, which I think is really cool. Oh god, you could potentially get T16 Hall Grandmasters. That's the new challenge. All these new bosses, irrelevant. If you could beat T16 Hall Grandmasters, you're doing good. If they actually scale, if the Grandmasters actually scale with monster HP and damage, that's terrifying. I don't know if they will, but if they do, that's terrifying. Blight has been added to the core game. You have a 10% chance to encounter Cassia and her singing while exploring the Atlas, so same as everything else, Breach, whatever. Each Blight encounter will award at least one oil or blighted map, so that's pretty good. I think that's way higher than the actual league was dropping, blighted map-wise. People were complaining they didn't get enough blighted maps the whole league, so we'll be able to get them fairly consistently. I don't remember if Blight was on the Xana missions or Xana options yet. I don't think so, but if it's in the core game, we'll at least have some supply. Cassie will still say some nonsense early because we haven't updated your script yet. That's fine. I've never heard her speak, so okay, that's okay by me. Character balance stuff. Fortifies damage reduction is now multiplicative with other effects. This was actually a nerf, not a buff, I think. Because it used to be the same type of thing, but now it's a separate modifier, so I think it's going to be less effective than it was before. You could become immune to damage before, which was a problem. Shock and Chill has been changed. I talked about this yesterday, but more or less it's easier to do it on bosses and easier on everything else. So it was because you couldn't really shock or freeze a boss or chill a boss most of the time because they just had too much HP and you had to hit them for like a quarter or more of their HP to get an effect on them. So it's just easier to do that now. They've added ailment threshold, which matches their life. It differs from monsters in especially high life environments like Shaper. That's fine. Yeah, again, it's just to make it easier to actually apply ailments to bosses because before you couldn't. The minimum shock and chill value is now 5% from 1%. To reach the minimum, you must deal 0.4% of a monster's HP with the associated element in a single hit. I think that's a lot easier to achieve. 10% chill is 1.8%. 30% chill requires 28% of the monster's maximum or ailment threshold, which is usually based off their life. I think that means Shaper has 20 million health, so you're gonna have to do like 5 million damage a hit to get a 30% chill on Shaper. But if you do half of it and you have a 100% chill effect, then you still get to deal that 30% chill with 14% max life, so it's pretty cool. Shock default is 15% from 20 on things like Skitterbots, and I don't know what else gives AoE shock, Vingtars. What is that chest called? Oh my god, I haven't played Pee-wee in so long. Impulses. And then the alternate ailments, Sap, Scorch, and Brittle have slightly different calculations, so they have lower caps. That's fine. Alright, so there's a bunch of skill reworks. Let's go ahead and get into those. Shrapnel Shot is now called Galvanic Arrow. Now fires 2 additional arrows at all levels. They now degrade in flight, eventually vanishing. This limits the skill's base range. Modifiers of projectile speed will allow the arrows to travel further before they vanish. I think this is going to happen on a lot of these skills. They want them to, like, because both skills were so powerful because they can hit off screen, they're kind of reducing that to make them like more balanced compared to melee, since melee can't off screen as hard as range characters can. But we'll see. That I might be wrong on that. It still deals a burst of damage in a cone, increases in reduction to arrow speed, also apply to the skill's AoE. Okay, so they actually buffed projectile speed. It has a pretty huge use now. It affects your range and it affects your AoE on the cones. Projectile speed before kind of didn't really do anything because it was still limited by the same ranges. It now gains flat lightning damage as the gem levels up to 979 level 20. That's a decent amount. I think that's more than, maybe not. I don't know what added lightning gem does anymore. Now gains 1% increased projectile speed per quality. So you get AoE and like range from that quality. That's pretty cool. They no longer pierce by default. That's kind of a nerf then, but all right, that's fine. Explosive Arrow now costs 8 mana at level 1 up from 18. Okay, so it's a lot easier to use right away and a lot cheaper at level 20 as well. That's nice. Explosive Arrow costs a lot of mana to a point where most Explosive Arrow builds in the past went Blood Magic because you couldn't sustain the mana. Because it's really hard to leech the mana back since it's not really an attack dealing the damage as much. Arrows stick to the enemy or wall and explode after duration. The duration no longer refreshes when a new arrow is attached. That's really good, actually. Before, if you like 5-stacked an enemy and kept shooting, it would never explode because it would just keep refreshing the duration. But now it's going to work more like mines, I think, where you can keep throwing them and they'll just keep chain exploding. If the enemy has multiple arrows stuck in them, the first one to explode will consume all other attached arrows. Never mind, it'll just blow up the whole stack. That's cool too. I'm fine with that. On-hit effects such as chance to ignite or critical strikes are determined by the exploding arrow, not the on-hit part. That's nice. However, each arrow's damage is calculated with their independent critical strike chance taken into account. What does that mean? For example, if the exploding arrow did not successfully roll a crit or ignite, the explosion will not ignite. I mean, that just makes sense, I guess. If 2 other arrows were also attached at the point of the explosion and they successfully rolled the crit, they will each add their critical strike damage to the explosion, but it will not cause an ignite. So if you stack like 5 arrows in a row and the first arrow that explodes doesn't crit, it won't ignite, basically. I think that makes sense. It's a bit confusing, but I'm sure you're going to be shooting fast enough to not really notice it that badly. And especially if your crit's high enough, most of the time we crit cap our crit builds anyway, so it probably won't matter that much, but it makes sense to be that consistent, I guess. Explosions now deal 50% of base damage. Previously, weapon damage was not taken into account. That's interesting. So before, you basically just wanted to use a +3 bow or like a high attack speed bow, like a Quill Rain for explosive arrow, but now you can actually scale your weapon damage and get that effect on the explosion. So you could use like a mirror to your bow with explosive arrow, and it would make sense. That's pretty cool. They also now deal added fire damage based on gem level, previously, up to 522 to 783 at level 20. So they nerfed the top end damage, but since they added base damage scaling, that means it'll be a lot higher overall. It now inherits base critical strike chance of your weapon. Again, you can use a high crit bow to go crit EA, that's nice. Now gains +2 to explosion radius up to a cap determined by gem level, +19 radius at level 20. Previously it naturally capped at +10. So that's like double the old AoE. And they now deal 3% more damage with ignite per explosive arrow on the target. So you can play burning explosive arrow again and just melt everything. Actually, that's really interesting. I wonder if you can do MF explosive arrow now with Wind Ripper and have it like actually function. I'm intrigued. I want to try that, maybe. We'll try that after League starts. Okay, this is just going to be a whole lot of number reading, so we'll go ahead and try to read it all. Skill balance stuff. All Ballista totem skills now place totem at melee range, so it places at your feet instead of in your radius. I think that's fine. Specific skill stuff. Arc has been buffed. They upped its range, that's cool. Blast Rain has been nerfed at level 1 and nerfed at level 20, but you now get additional explosions per additional projectiles, and you get 5 additional projectiles at all levels from 4. So you can scale additional arrows now, and like Dying Sun and whatnot, to make your Blast Rain have even more shotgunning explosions. So I would say overall that's probably a buff. Burning Arrow is now 100% phase conversion from fire, great. Instead of 50, it now has 50% chance to ignite at all levels. That's a pretty big buff then. You can go ignite or Burning Arrow right away. It now deals 50% more damage with Ignite. So they're really pushing the Ignite Burning Arrow. I like that. It now applies an additional debuff when you ignite, dealing extra burning damage based on the magnitude of the Ignite. Again, just huge ignites. And it now gains 1% fire damage over time multiplier per gem quality from Ignite duration. That's also a huge buff. So you get more multiplier instead of duration. That's fine. I'll take that. Caustic Arrow was buffed, looks like. Yeah, like 10% more damage, that's cool. It now gains even more radius, double the radius, that's great, more buffs. Discharge no longer has a target limit. A lot of people didn't know this existed, I didn't either for a long time, but you can only hit 30 things at a time, which sounds like it's enough, but sometimes there's like 100 enemies on the screen and you couldn't hit all of them. So that's been fixed. Hopefully it doesn't crash your instance when you do it, but if you want to like Vol Cyclone stack the entire screen on top of you in a breach or something and then blow it up, you could do that now. Let's see, was Ellie hit nerfed? And slight damage nerf at level 1 and a slight nerf at level 20. Okay. To be fair, Ellie hit was really strong, so that's fine. They might be just trying to shift the meta a little bit from Ellie hit onto the other skills. Was it all a nerf? Yeah, slight nerf on cold damage. Slight nerf on lightning damage as well. Actually pretty heavy nerf on lightning damage, but most Ellie hit builds are fire damage, so it's mostly this one that's relevant. Freeze Pulse, the art now more accurately reflects the rate at which damage dealt by the projectile is reduced, so it'll fade faster or more accurately as it goes farther away. I think that's fine. No nerfs or buffs otherwise. Ice Shot no longer leaves chilled ground on impact, now deals 130% base damage up to... Okay, so buffs on base damage, it now chills damage as though dealing 100% more damage, up to 195% damage. So they made it a lot easier to chill enemies with it, but you don't get the AoE chill anymore. I think that's fine. And they buffed its damage. So Ice Shot buffed. And no more lag from the chilled ground trails, I guess is the real takeaway there. Icicle Mine was providing enormous area coverage and damage at very little cost and was causing performance problems. These changes are intended to bring it in line with other mines as well as alleviate the performance issues. Projectiles now fade over time, similar to Freeze Pulse, but without the gradual damage drop off. In other words, the mines will have a shorter range by default, but can be increased by projectile speed. Again, giving you a reason to actually invest in a projectile speed, so that's kind of cool. Now has 4 projectiles up from 6, so that's a nerf to projectiles. And it now gets projectile speed instead of damage. So they kind of give you the AoE back, but you lose some damage in projectiles. I never played Icicle Mines, but I would assume this is a nerf, because that's what it sounds like it's supposed to be. Lancing Steel has been buffed. Yeah, 5% buffs, and now gets Impale effect from chance to impale. I think that's good because we all have 100% chance to impale from like the tree and Dread Banner or whatever. So this means you get more damage out of it from the impales instead of useless impale chance. Let's see, Lightning Arrow buffed at level 1 and buffed at level 20. Same as Ice Shot. It makes it easier to shock enemies. That's cool. You get shock effect as well, and you get chance to shock and shock effect instead of chance to shock only. Again, just overall buffs to Lightning Arrow. Cool. Lightning Spire Trap. Probably a nerf, I would guess. Yeah. Nerfed and nerfed at level 20. And nerfed how fast it strikes at all levels. So overall, nerf for Lightning Spire Trap. Lightning Warp. If you cast multiple Lightning Warps rapidly, you will now travel between all of them as you trigger the warp. The timing for each subsequent warp is based on the distance from the previous warp. I'm not sure exactly what that means, because before you could only have 1 Lightning Warp up at a time, but now you might be able to cast like a chain of 3 or 4 of them and then end up at the end of it instead of going doot 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 doot. I'll have to experiment with that. They might be trying to make it so you can Lightning Warp instead of Flame Dash everywhere, because currently the meta is like Flame Dash or Blink. So that's cool. We'll see more Lightning Warp builds. Let's Molten Strike. Were you nerfed? No, they nerfed it early game but buffed it late game. So it can scale harder, but it's worse early on. I think that's fine. Orb of Storms has been nerfed. That's fair. Not much of a nerf, but a little bit. And nerfed how fast it strikes at early game mostly. Endgame is about the same. Same as like the Lightning Spire Trap. They're nerfing the things that racers are using to like power level or speed clear, whatever you want to call it. Mostly early on because it was too strong early. Nothing to worry about endgame though. Pestilent Strike now gains melee range. Great. Punishment now causes cursed enemies to have negative 20% to reduce physical damage taken. This is actually a big change. So punishment for the longest time was you cursed an enemy and they had to actually hit you with a melee hit to get the damage buff against them. It was really weird and hard to use, especially with how fast we clear nowadays. You don't want enemies to hit you or you die at endgame content. So it just didn't get to use it at all. But now it sounds like you can actually use it to buff your pure fizz builds. Oh, never mind. They still have to hit you. Never mind. I didn't read the second line. I don't like that. Okay, so never mind. It's still kind of useless unless maybe you're tanking a boss or something. It doesn't make sense. They have to hit you to get the curse effect. There's no situation where you want that to happen. Whatever. Alright, Rain of Arrows looks like it was buffed at level 1 and level 20. Great overall buffs. Raise Spectre, I think they nerfed it because it was too easy to get additional Spectres, so now you have to invest harder into getting your 3rd Spectre, I think. It requires level 25 instead of level 21. So, shouldn't be that hard to get at endgame, but it means that you won't be able to do it with just the Necromancer Ascendancy +1 levels, so I think that's good. You have to have some more investment into your gear. Zombies, I think were nerfed across the board. They gave it a longer cooldown on the slam, nerfed its AoE, it's slower, has less effectiveness. Oh god, lots of nerfs. They nerfed its damage by 25% at all levels, no longer grants more life as it levels, but they gain base life. And now increases the AoE as the gem levels. So basically zombies were too good for no investment, so they nerfed them across the board. Scourge Arrow now gets 28% from 40. So, ooh, damn, big nerfs to Scourge Arrow. But they gave it some flat chaos damage to compensate. People aren't using Scourge Arrow for chaos damage, they're using it for elemental scaling, so I guess this is their way of trying to shift it back towards chaos. But that's a pretty big nerf. That's like 14% less damage. Whatever, we'll see. It's probably fine. Scourge Arrow you can achieve millions and millions of DPS with, so you might not notice it that much. Shattering Steel is now faster and does slightly more damage, so that's a buff. Smoke Mine was nerfed across the board, same as the previous racer skills because it's too good on racing. It's also nerfed to lab runners, which is fine. Some of the lab runners are doing it in like 2 minutes for Uber Lab, so nerfing that's I think okay. Let's see, Siege Ballista requires level 12 instead of level 4, and they nerfed its base damage. and it's level 20 damage. But you now get +2 totems right away, so that's probably a buff overall. Instead of only having 1 totem, you can have 3, which is pretty huge. You now get projectile damage per quality instead of totem placement speed. That's probably fine. I'd say overall that's probably a pretty big buff. Nova is now faster. I'm sorry, what am I saying? Not Nova. Spectral Throw is now faster. Split Arrow gained some flat physical damage, so that's a pretty big buff. Soul Rend was buffed across the board. Stormblast Mine was nerfed, sounds like. Nerfed at level 1, but buffed at level 20. Okay, so it scales harder, but it's harder to use at the beginning. It's probably fine. Summon Raging Spirits will now try to travel to the location your cursor was over at the point they were summoned until they... Wow, sorry, I can't read. Let me start over. Summon Raging Spirits will now try to travel to the location your cursor was over at the point they were summoned, unless they find an enemy before they arrive. So you can actually aim your Raging Spirits. Okay, I think that's good for boss clearing. You can like put them behind the boss if you wanted to or something. From range, I think that's good. Tornado Shot. Secondary projectiles now fade over time, similar to Freezing Pulse, but without the drop-off. In other words, the secondary projectiles will have a shorter range, but can be increased by increasing projectile speed. They said that they were going to gut Tornado Shot. That doesn't sound like if they're gutting it. It just means you won't be able to off-screen as hard. But most of the Tornado Shot builds are playing with like Chain and Fork, which multiplies the base range anyway. So I doubt we're going to even notice this, especially when you have multiple chaining effects. Like, yeah, it's like, so you have multiple jumps, right? They made the range of each jump shorter, but it's still going to be more than a screen of AoE on the secondary projectile. I don't think it's going to matter. Let's see, Toxic Rain was buffed at level 1 and slightly buffed at level 20. Sure. Vol Burning Arrow probably got the same changes as Burning Arrow. Looks like it. Yeah, it's just got a lot more ignite damage. The rest of it looks the same as Burning Arrow though. So that's a buff. Vol Spectral Throw was made faster. Venom Gyre was buffed at 1 and 20. Volatile Dead now has a limit of 60 orbs. Oh, come on. What was the limit? It doesn't have a limit before? That sounds like a lot of orbs. It's probably not a big deal unless you're like Headhunter stacked to hell and casting 50,000 times a second, but that's, I mean, I guess that's fine. Support Gem Reworks. Range attack totem is now called Ballista. It was, oh god, nerfed at level 1 and level 20. But supported skills now have +2. So you can immediately get 3 Ballista totems with any supported skill. So you get 3 totems, but they nerf the damage to compensate. I think it's overall still going to be higher damage than 1 totem. And you can have 3 totems worth of health to tank with. I wonder how effective like explosive arrow ballista totems for like boss killing will be. Oh, we can do barrage totems now, or more easily, I guess. You can have 3 barrage totems to kill bosses with on your like Tornado Shot Winder Bruise. I don't know. That's interesting. Support gem balance stuff. Feeding Frenzy I think was nerfed across the board. Yeah, slight nerfs because it was too strong. Talked about Fortify. It's the same as Fortify support. It's the same type instead of it being a separate like layer. Let's see. Impale now grants supported skills -30% to total physical damage reduction against Impale hits at all gem levels. So I actually was talking to this about with a couple people yesterday because I didn't really get it in the manifesto. They were giving Impale support or Impale effect and whatnot and weapon phase reduction on weapon nodes. They're basically what they're trying to do is keep Impale good for weapon builds but nerf it for minions. Because people were playing Impale zombies and whatnot because they had so much phase damage that it made sense to do that. But now with the armor buffs, those minions are getting hit by the armor buffs and the Impale builds aren't as much, if that makes sense. Because the Impale builds actually scale into the reduced phase reduction or whatever, you know? So they'll still have all their armor pen and whatnot, but the minions don't gain that because they don't have those skills on the tree. So I think that makes sense. I didn't get it yesterday, but I get it now. Inspiration support. Supported skills were... Okay, so they nerfed this slightly at level 20, but it's the same at level 1. And they nerfed the crit as well. Okay, sure. Lesser multiple projectiles was buffed. Yeah, they buffed it. Cool. Mini damage support was nerfed at level 1, but the same at 20. and they nerfed its quality bonus, so slight nerf to minion damage, but not by much. Mirage Archer was nerfed pretty hard, and they lowered its range because it's been an auto-include. It's like, it makes sense. It was an auto-include on every single bow build no matter what, because it was just so much more damage in AoE clear. They had to reduce its effectiveness. I think that's fine. It's probably still going to be really, really good, but it's not as good. See, Onslaught was nerfed, sounds like. Again, probably one of the racer nerfs, because it was too strong for racing and no one else used it. That's fine. They buffed its quality bonus though, so that's kind of cool. Point Blank was nerfed, and now is 30% more damage instead of 50, and 30% less instead of 50% less. It was too much power, and it forced all bow characters to play like they were melee. So maybe we'll see bow characters actually use their range for boss killing instead of sitting inside of the boss's animation, like I always have done. Volley was buffed pretty hard. Yeah, they reduced a lot of its less damage multiplier, and it has new art. I still want to see Volley with Split Arrow. That'll be cool. Okay, let's try to look at the passive tree rebalance. We talked about Point Blank like 2 seconds ago. New cluster to the southeast of Ranger, so bottom right corner of the tree. Watchtowers, it gives bonuses to attack totems and allows you to summon an additional Ballista totem. Okay, so you can get that, and the wow, so you can have 4 pretty soon when you start. That's nice, 4 totems. Ironwood cluster has been moved to south of the Duelist, has been expanded, and now includes 2 additional notables, Panopticon and Surveillance. Doesn't tell us what those are, but okay. Movement speed for minions granted by Ravenous Horde cluster has been halved, so nerfs to minions. Graceful Assault has been moved closer to the Ranger from south of the Duelist. Sure. Honed Edge cluster has been moved 1 passive. I don't really know what any of this does without being able to like reference the tree constantly, so that's fine. Ambient Dexterity Blade Barrier has been moved east several passives. I don't even know how to like explain what any of this means. They gave Lava Lash notable some fire damage over time multiplier, so that's nice. New cluster to the east of the Shadow. Shocking Strikes, lightning damage with attack skills, chance of shock, increased effective shock, and increased critical strike chance against shocked enemies. So they're pushing more lightning attack clusters up northeast. That's cool. New cluster between Ranger and the Duelist, Burning Brutality, so south part of the tree. For the fire damage attack skills, that's fine. And then they probably added a similar one somewhere for cold. No, maybe not. That's not fun. They added a fire damage cluster and a lightning attack cluster, but there's no cold attack cluster. Why not? Flash freeze now grants 10% chance to freeze, and then they changed some other stuff about it. Cool. Added a new stat, -X to total physical damage reduction from your hits. This is what we were talking about earlier with the Impale stuff. They wanted to make sure that Impale still felt good, but make sure that they didn't, like, they nerfed the minions with Impale, they left the Impale builds alone. So they've added it to most of the, like, notables that we would normally take. So it should be fine. New, very similar stat, enemies you Impale have -X to fist damage reduction against Impale hits. Yeah, same thing. They put it on the Impale nodes and the, like, weapon notables. I think that's fine. Ascendancy rebalances. Necromancer, they nerfed the minion movement speed. Commander of Darkness now grants the attack and cast speed aura for a single combined aura, as a single combined aura, rather than a separate aura for each other aura skill you had. This matters for effects that care about how many buffs you have, such as Mantra Flames. So this is a nerf to Necromancer aura bots. Pretty hard nerf, actually. You used to be able to stack like 15 plus auras to get that bonus for each aura. Now you only get it once. So we're probably going to see more like Champion aura bots and maybe Guardian aura bots, Scion aura bots. I don't know what other aura bots we can have, but less Necromancers for pure damage. I think that's fine. Unwavering Faith from Guardian now grants physical damage reduction and life regen aura as a single. It's the same as this one. So you only get 1 stack instead of a bunch of stacks. It's a pretty hard nerf to both of them, actually. Slayer, Endless Hunger now causes you to be unaffected by bleeding rather than immune. So for those of you that don't play self-bleed builds, this does nothing. But for those of you that play the self-bleed Golden Rule style builds where you want to be bleeding and poisoned, you can actually do that as a Slayer now without your Ascendancy turning it off. That's all that means. If you're not using that, it doesn't affect you. You're still immune to the bleed damage. Item rebalance stuff. They buffed a lot of bows to have higher crit and crit multi implicit. It's great. They buffed Steelwood bows and reflex bows so you can run faster. and Mariketh bows. They buff the attack speed on Spine, Ivory, and Bow, and the crit. The damage has been lowered to allow for the change to attack speed. Okay, so they're trying to keep like the same DPS, but make them attack faster, which means that they scale harder into endgame. Ranger bow base types have more damage. Wand base types have 20% more base damage. Okay, huge wand buff overall, that's nice. Bows and wands, okay, and because it changed the base types of all of these, I don't know if you can bless old items to add implicits. You might not be able to. But the crit strike chance should change, and if they do like base damage multiplier stuff like this, it should change without having to do anything else. Bows and wands can now roll attack speed modifiers of 1 tier higher, so I think it's like 17 to 19% higher now. Or 17 to 19% T1 now. It was like, oh god, 14 to 16% before, I think. So it's just slightly higher scaling. Added fire, cold, lightning damage for bows no longer use the same modifiers as those found on 1%. On one-handed weapons. They instead have their own progression, which is approximately 25% stronger than the one-hand equivalents. Okay, so they basically buffed the flat LE modifiers for bows. I think that's good overall. This is just a huge buff to bows and wands overall. Crafted modifiers. This is probably going to be a lot of nerfs. Faster start of energy shield recharge has been nerfed, but it costs less. Interesting. So it used to cost an Exalt for T1, now it costs 4 Alchemy Orbs, but they nerfed it by 9%. I mean, it's more attainable, but it's worse. I guess that's okay. You can now no longer craft +1 curses on body armors. I just got a whole lot of legacy mirror items. Oof. I have so many +1 curse chests. That's funny. Alright, whatever. You can no longer craft veiled added damage of specific elements with an ailment chance on bows. So there was like fire damage with chance to ignite. They got rid of that. Crafted modifiers which grant LE damage or chaos pen on weapons have been nerfed. Pretty hard nerf actually. 6% less pen. Okay. So again, more legacy crafts if you already have it. Crafting suffix was previously allowed you to craft any number of additional mods on the item, now allows you to craft only 3. This affects existing items. Items with the mod will now be limited to 2 additional crafts. So you can only do multi-mod plus 2 crafts now? Instead of multi-mod plus 5. But any items with any more than the allowed number of crafted mods will keep those mods. So again, legacy multi-modded everything. If you want to make a bunch of multi-modded stuff to sell on standard, do it in the next like 2 days. Veiled and crafted modifiers with hybrid defenses have had their values halved and their tier progression split by item type. I think that's a nerf. I'm not 100% sure. So a whole lot of legacy stuff basically. Again, every league I like look at patch notes, I'm like, damn, okay, half my mirror tab went legacy again. It just keeps happening. Like, I'm not intending to make legacy stuff. I just make good stuff, and then the good stuff gets nerfed, and then you can't make it ever again. It's just, it feels weird. Like, if you don't keep up with crafting, like last league I didn't craft anything with oils or anything yet, but I think that went core, so it's fine. But if I hadn't, like if oils hadn't gone core, all of those oil crafted amulets and whatnot would be strictly better than anything else. So it's kind of annoying. Like, you have to be on top of the crafting game every single league, or your items, or the items that you wanted to make that league will never be available again. It's just, it's weird. I don't like them releasing OP shit and then continuously removing it. Like, it's, I don't know. It's weird. I don't like it. Shaper and Elder modifiers. Shaper and Elder Fizz damage added as X has been nerfed again. Okay. So the stat stick modifiers have been cut by 1/4 again. They were already cut by half. They used to be 40% extra damage, and now they're 20%, and next league they're going to be 15%. They're still realizing how busted those mods are. We knew from the start 40% extra was stupid. 20% extra is still dumb. 50% extra is like still pretty good. So same thing though, it's just more legacy shit. Shaper and Elder attack speed double damage modifiers has been massively nerfed. Holy shit. 20% chance double damage, 12% attack speed on bows has been reduced to like 6% double damage. Which was, again, stupidly OP modifier. It was just 20% more damage, and now it's 6% more damage, which is less broken. Elemental penetration suffix modifiers can no longer roll. Dude, there's so many legacy items being created. What the hell? You used to be able to get 10% Elipen suffixes. Those are gone. Oof. Adding it to the prefix means that you can't have like triple fizz damage prefixes like hybrid fizz, flat fizz, percent fizz, and then Elipen suffix attack speed. That's impossible now. You have to give up a prefix for the pen, which is bad. No one's gonna do that. Bows can no longer roll the two-handed damage of added cold per dex. Nerf. Legacy bows, go make your added cold per dex rolls right now. They can now only roll the one-handed version instead, so you can't scale nearly as hard with dex stacking bows. Dex stacking bows were so strong. Let's see. Increased maximum mana on helmets was nerfed across the board. Higher tier increased all attributes modifier on amulets can no longer roll. I think that's the percent all attributes. Nerfed, or removed entirely actually, from the higher tier. So they took away, I think it's like, oh god, what is it? I want to say 9 to 12% all attributes has been removed. 10% Elipen on amulets has been removed, but you can still roll below that. Lower tier reduced reflected damage has now 100% reduced. That's kind of cool. Okay. So instead of it being mostly useless because it only went up to 22% reduced reflected damage taken, which is not enough to keep you alive in a reflect map, it's now 100% reduced. So you can actually become immune to reflect maps with a crafted or with a modifier on your chest piece. That makes it useful. It used to be completely useless, and now that's like, you can build immune builds again. You can run any map mod style builds again. I like that. Reduced reflected LE damage on rings now grants 45%. Okay, so you can build the same thing. You can make 2 rings with reduced reflected damage and become immune to reflect on your rings. I like that change, actually. That makes sense. Non-chaos's extra damage on amulets has been nerfed. They're nerfing all the stat stick modifiers. It took them so long to do this. LE damage as extra chaos has been nerfed as well. But they gave staves and war staves a version of it. That's fine. Recover mana on block has been nerfed. You can no longer roll chance to evade on rings, the highest tier one. You can still obtain the lowest tier. I think there was a build that was like evade capped, dodge capped, block capped, so they had to nerf it slightly. They buffed, no wait, yeah, they buffed all res on belts. That's cool. You can no longer roll chance to maim and maim support modifiers on two-handed maces. RIP. Hybrid fizz damage and support slash spell damage. What am I trying to say? Hybrid physical damage and support spell damage and support modifiers can no longer roll on two-handed weapons. I believe they're talking about like the percent fizz level 20 fortify or percent fizz level 20 maim, that sort of things. Like those have been removed entirely from two-handers. So if you have one of those, they're now legacy. Congratulations. Added fizz and chaos damage to spells on weapons has been buffed. Hey, look, a buff. Two-handed versions have been buffed harder. Great. So like one buff and then everything else is a nerf. Enjoy your legacy stashes. So stupid. All right. Fossil crafting. Supported by main modifier from serrated fossils can no longer roll on body armors. More legacy items. Your extra 7-link chest is now legacy. Damage taken from mana before life is now prefix to be consistent with Shaper. Existing mod versions will remain suffixes. Oh, okay. So there was actually double MOM chests. You could have damage taken from mana on a prefix and a suffix, but now it's just a prefix. Nerf. Lower legacy items. Added maximum life and increased life modifier from pristine fossils can no longer roll. Nerf. Legacies. So that's the flat life, percent life prefix on pristines. They got rid of it entirely. That's funny. LE penetration modifiers has been nerfed across the board. Prismatic fossil modifiers for weapons have been nerfed across the board. Jesus Christ. This is so many nerfs, dude. Oh god. Alright, what else do we say? Other item changes. Waddle's modifier on boots, which grants chance to dodge, now grants... That's, again, nerf. Existing versions can be updated with a divine orb if you want to be hit more often for some reason. They're just trying to get rid of the dodge capped builds. Spell modifiers, spell damage modifiers for one-handed weapons have been buffed. Okay, there we go. There's a buff. Two-handed weapons has been buffed as well. I'm assuming you can divine those higher from what they were before. That's kind of cool. Increased cold fire lightning damage prefixes has also been raised. I'm hoping that, okay, so they didn't say tiers, they just said they changed the modifier, so that means that T1, instead of being 79% max, is now 109% max, so you can divine the T1 up to that tier, up to that range, I should say. Which means that, like, if you make a pure, like a fire damage RF scepter, for example, Righteous Fire Scepter, you just gained 30% spell damage, or 30% fire damage, sorry, so that's pretty cool. They buffed a lot of builds with stuff like that. Cartographer seals and unshaping orbs can no longer be obtained via the recipe as they're no longer used. You can sell them to a vendor to get the stuff back. Nice. Okay, so they gave you a way to return it. That's cool. Apprentice sextants are now called simple sextants. Journeyman sextants are now called prime sextants. Lemon Prime coming out. I'm sorry. And master cartographer sextants have been renamed awakened sextants. They each have new art. Cool, I guess. Sextants are no longer used on maps. They're used on watchstones, which affect all maps in that region. Great. Rewards from Legion and Blight encounters have been tweaked. Explain. What does tweaked mean? Did you nerf it? Or did you buff it? The number of gems rewarded by Labyrinth chests has been reduced. Aw, so you can no longer get like 20 quality 20 gems at the same time? Dang, that wasn't OP at all. This actually, like, this helps a lot. It increases the value of GCPs, as well as increases the value of finding a quality gem, like, overall. So that's cool. It got to a point where like 20 quality gems were only worth like 5 chaos because there were just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them out there. So I think that's good. Modifiers exclusive to Convoking Wand base types have had their relative weightings adjusted. That means that it's harder to roll minion modifiers on Convoking Wands than it was before because it was too easy before. They buffed all lab helm enchants that give AoE, but I still don't think it's enough. It does not affect existing enchantments. You might they didn't say specifically if you can Bless Orb them. You used to be able to Bless Orb helmet enchants to the new values. You might still be able to do that. If you have an AoE helmet enchant, I would try Bless Orbing it after this patch hits, see if it goes up to the new value. If not, I don't know. I guess you have to run lab again. Blast Rate additional blast enchant can no longer be acquired from Merciful Labyrinth. The Eternal Labyrinth now grants 100% chance from 75. Existing items are not affected. Again, I'm going to try to Bless Orb these. I think I actually have some Blast Rain helmets. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, so this... No, that's not even it. I don't have one then, I don't think. Alright, well... It was 75% additional, now it's 100% additional, so that's kind of cool. I don't know if you can Bless Orb it, though. Sweep Enchant. Sweep, which previously granted additional knockback chance, now grants a chance to gain an endurance charge on kill. This affects additional items. That's a pretty cool change, because knockback chance is useless, but endurance chance charge on kill is really good. Sweep builds can now have like full endurances up all the time without putting endurance charge on melee stun in it or anything. That's pretty good. Labyrinth enchantments, which granted increased duration for chilled ground, now grant increased damage. This affects existing items. Okay, sure. They put that chill effect on the like hits itself anyway, so you don't need the chill ground anymore. It just gives you damage instead. Labyrinth enchantments, which granted AoE for shrapnel shot, can no longer be obtained. Existing items are unaffected, so that's a legacy enchant. Shaper and Elder Scarabs have been reworked. They now add Shaper and Elder influence outcomes to the map area, and they grant 90% more chance to find Shaper or Elder rare items in the top tier ones. That's pretty good. I was a little worried about that when they removed Shaper and Elder influence. Like, I was gonna, how do you get Shaper and Elder items? Like, it's impossible, but they buffed the Scarabs to compensate, hopefully. Price of Protection Divination cards has been disabled because T16 Elder Chateau maps are no longer a thing. You can still turn in existing sets from a map from the previous series. The guy who made that div card, whoever it was, like, I don't know what they were thinking. They made a specific Elder map, but they removed Elder influence, so it's no longer a thing. They're gonna have to rework it to something else. And they removed the Sextant upgrading recipe. Oh, interesting. That's a big change, actually. So you used to be able to turn in 3 Sextants to get one of the higher tier, but since they changed them, I guess they didn't want that to happen anymore. Okay. I guess that means that farming bulk low tier maps for low tier Sextants and turning them in for higher tier is less profitable. So they're trying to encourage some like running of endgame maps more now instead of just farming low tier maps like we did for the last couple leagues. T3 glaciers and whatnot, city squares. Alright, unique item balance stuff. Reach of the Council is not changing in this update. We have some very cool plans for this item. but could not get them ready in time. F. Volley fire is now limited to 1. You can have 6 additional on the first and last volley up from 2. Existing items can be updated with the new value of the Divine Orb, however, all versions are affected by the new limit. Okay. SNS Chant now triggers a socketed spell when you attack with a bow. Previously had a 25% chance, but it now has a longer cooldown. Existing items are affected, even though the values may say otherwise. Okay. I think that's a good thing. 100% chance is much more reliable. Emberwake now causes enemies to burn slower. Oh, they just gave it a range instead of it always being 65%. It's got a range now, so you can divine it for the perfect if you wanted to. They nerfed Hiri's Ire because it was too strong. They buffed Quill Rain. They changed Zoph's Nurture to Ignite Prolif instead of Ignite to inflict spread to other enemies. I think that's a buff. Not 100% sure. Unshattered Will's damage reduction from the Harbinger is now multiplicative. That's the same as the Fortify change. They just wanted it so that you couldn't get immunity. Snakebite now grants 5% damage over time multiplier for poison per frenzy charge. That's a big buff, actually. So if you have 10 frenzy charges, Snakebite's gonna give you a shitload of damage. I like that. Namahu's Flame now deals 15% more damage. The Molten Burst on Namahu's has been buffed across the board. Cool. Hollow Ground no longer overrides the level of monsters. It now adds or subtracts the number of levels from the monsters within it based on the mod. This is due to the capacity for it to now have a variable tier. Because you can get T16 versions, they just had to change it, so that made sense. Okay, sure. Pitch Darkness no longer drops and cannot be obtained outside of trading. I think that's the Burning Arrow additional Ignite gem, so that's Legacy, or Jewel, sorry. Which makes sense since they buffed the fuck out of how much burning damage that skill can do. So if you want to make an insane double Ignite damage Burning Arrow build in Standard, you can do that. That's kind of cool. Sudden Ignition no longer drops and cannot be obtained. Oh wait, sorry, that's what this one. Never mind. I don't know what Pitch Darkness is. So Sudden Ignition no longer drops and cannot be attained outside of trading with other players. It now prevents Burning Arrow from applying its additional burning debuff. Never mind, you can't do anything I just said. What's Pitch Darkness? I don't recognize that name, my bad. Sibyl's Lament now reduces reflected elemental damage taken by 80%, up from 40, and reduces reflective phase. Okay, so they just doubled the effect. So if you have 2 of them, you're immune, but 1 of them is not quite enough, probably. Uriel's Fosterings are now immune to damage and cannot be targeted. The minions by the chest piece, I think. Well, Toxic Rift now allows you to shock enemies as if dealing 300% more damage. Okay. And it allows shocks you inflict to increase damage taken by enemies up to a maximum of 100%. So Voltaxic Rift got a pretty huge buff, actually. Neat. I'll take that. It's Shrapnel Shot? Wait, what? Pitch Darkness is Shrapnel Shot? I don't know, whatever. We'll figure that out, it's fine. I don't think it matters that much. World changes. 2 new areas connected to the Epilogue Town have been added. It can be accessed by progressing through Kirak's quest. Who the fuck is Kirak? Helena now has something to say about the Order of the Jinn. I don't know what either of those things are. I don't know anything about the lore in PoE at all, other than Piety's, like, OP and Malachi's OP, and Xana is better than everything else. Xana is the most powerful being in our universe. Besides Kalandra, but we don't know anything about Kalandra yet. Alright, monster changes. Monster encounters for the entire campaign have been made more difficult. Significantly more life, more damage, and use some skills and attacks more quickly. Especially true for act bosses. Several bosses have new skills. Great. We wanted them to be more challenging. That's happening. Many bosses with lengthy introductions, such as the Brine King, now take reduced damage for a short period immediately after becoming targetable. Oh, I know why that was. They wanted you to they wanted to nerf stacking like traps and mines and whatever else on the ground before the boss is actually damageable. So that's what this is achieving. That's again mostly a nerf to racers, so you can't one-shot the boss after it becomes hittable. Monsters throughout the game have more armor. Jesus, that's a lot of percent armor. Sounds a lot scarier than it is because their base armor is stirringly unimpressive. 2,762%. It's interesting to me that they gave them percent armor scaling instead of just buffing their base armor per level, you know? But I guess if they have some kind of base armor multiplier, then the percent becomes a lot more terrifying. I don't know. That's a weird way to do it, but okay. I don't know the math behind it, but I'm trying to trust GG on that one. Monster resistances throughout the game has been reviewed and made more consistent, and in many cases this has resulted in more resist. So overall, everything's going to be harder, basically. Great. They changed some skill on Sea Witches, so it's not a projectile. That's fine. Basically everything's harder. Betrayal changes. The Mastermind will now drop Scarabs when slain. That's nice. More reliable Scarab generation. That's cool. Safe house outcomes that reward Scarabs now have a chance to reward additional Scarabs. So even more Scarabs to achieve the Shaper and Elder influence thing we talked about earlier. That's fine. Atlas has... Okay, sorry. Map changes. The Atlas has been completely reworked. There's a new storyline, new bosses, and new ways to customize it. Elder Shaper and combined Elder Shaper encounters can still be accessed. If you're lucky, Xana may give you a Shaper or Elder Guardians map. Cool. Elder Guardians are no longer in a separate instance to that of their map, so there's no more load screen. That's nice. Like the bosses throughout the campaign, most map bosses have had their life significantly increased and the damage and speed of several skills increased. They gave them resist as well. Cool. When encountering Xana, the number of map options he offers is now tied to the level of the area. So if it's a higher level area, you get more map options, I think. I think that's what that means. Great. Xana's level, which determines which map device crafting options you have available, as well as what map Xana can stock in her vendor window, is now determined by the number of maps you have completed on your Atlas. Instead of the Elder quest, I guess, since they got rid of the like Shaper Elder quest to get all the orbs. That makes sense. So you have to fill out your whole Atlas to get... Ooh, that's interesting. You have to fill out your whole Atlas to get the options done. So they're really pushing you doing your full Atlas instead of shaping for a specific map. Which I guess you can't even do anymore with the new changes, so I guess that makes sense. Maps now have a 10% chance to contain a Vol side area, where you can find Sacrifice Fragments and Vol Gems. That's a pretty good thing, actually. Because before, the best way to get fragments was to run Labyrinth, which makes no sense, but now you can map for fragments, so that's nice. Cortex map is now more commonly available from Xana relative to the other Synthesis maps, so you can fight the Cortex bosses from Synthesis League more often. It's now always level 83. All Synthesis maps now require a minimum level 80 area to appear in Xana's mission window. So you have to do like, what, T13 plus maps, I think? Or T14 plus maps to get Synthesis options. Cool. All 5 Synthesis maps can now drop as uniques. They can only be acquired from map bosses of T11 or greater, or 14 or greater for Cortex. Or if you're very, very lucky, maybe Xana will sell you one. So they just made them more available across the board. That's nice. I've actually never seen the Cortex bosses or fought them myself, so that'll be fun. Xana map mods available during 3.9. Fortune favors the brave. Essence, Anarchy, Domination, Bloodlines, Nemesis, Beyond, and Legion. So you can chance Headhunter still. You can chance an Ancient Orb Headhunter. You can spam Bloodlines for maps. You can spam Beyond for Headhunter buffs. And you can farm Legion. That's kind of cool. So you can't farm Blight, but I guess that's fine. I think that's a good selection overall. I'm okay with that. User interface improvements. World panel map now supports curved lines from waypoint to waypoint. I guess that's cool. Sure. Resonator stack sizes are no longer obscured by the resonator sockets in the Delve Stash tab. I actually didn't buy the Delve Stash tab because I had I had like 8 quad tabs or maybe more of fossils and resonators, but once they added the stacking thing, I put them all in one quad tab. But I haven't bought this yet, so I don't know what that means. Added slots in the fragment stash tab for Elder and Uber Elder fragments. Uber Elder fragments? Elder fragments? Okay, sure. Quest rewards. Xana no longer awards maps as you complete the Xana Atlas questline. Instead, she awards free uses of her special map device League modifiers the first time they're unlocked. Okay, that's kind of cool. So when you unlock like Essence, for example, you'll get like, I don't know, however many free uses. That's kind of nice, actually. It'll encourage people to try these and see which one they like, instead of always having to pay the chaos cost. And then they've just changed a bunch of the gem locations. Sure, that's fine. I don't need to read all that. They just had to coincide with the new levels required to use them, so it's cool. PvP changes. PvP only characters can no longer appear on League ladders. Great. Barrage support now gets a 20% damage penalty. Arrow Nova support has a damage penalty. Greater Volley has a damage penalty. And Artillery Ballista has a damage penalty. Sure. I used to PvP back in like 2.0 to 2.6, but they don't balance it fast enough for my liking. Anytime they add a new skill, it doesn't have a PvP scaling modifier on it, so if you deal a million damage, to a player that has 5k life, they're just fucking dead. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really care about PvP anymore because of that. And then a bunch of bug fixes, which I'm not going to read because I didn't play this league at all, but if you want to pause it right now and read them, I didn't play anything, so I don't know if any of these are relevant anymore, but they've been fixed. Congratulations. And then Shaper and other modifiers. Edit, you can no longer roll chance to evade attacks on rings. You can still obtain the lower tier. Okay, so we already read that, I think. Wow. That's a lot of changes. Some good, some bad, a lot of nerfs, a lot of buffs. I'm excited for bow reworks. I think this league is going to be League of Bows, which I feel like has also been the case for a long time already. Like Ellie hit, Tornado Shot, and like Toxic Rain have been top running builds for a long time now. I don't foresee that changing, but I think it means we're going to see more types of bow builds. We might see Lightning Arrow, Ice Shot, Ellie hit, Caustic Arrow, Burning Arrow. I think we're going to see a lot of Burning Arrow builds. Ignite Burning Arrow is probably going to be a pretty big archetype this league. I'm hoping we see more Blast Rain. Blast Rain is my favorite bow skill personally. We're probably going to see a lot of arc builds come back as well. But alright, that's cool. I don't know if you guys have any questions about anything. For those on YouTube, leave in the comments. For those of you on Twitch, we'll start talking about them now. I'm sorry I've been ignoring chat, but we'll discuss things now. And I'll get this up on YouTube later.